thank you again for this film. I rewatched it just now in the theater and am feeling quite moved, I've just been released from a trance, and so I'm going to ask you. I have a lot of questions, so I'll dive right in. I think a good place to start is the title of the film, of Living Without Illusion. And, of course, by the end of the film, we've encountered that phrase in the passage by Ingeborg Bachmann that's read aloud. But I think the question of illusion is a thread that runs through the film from the very first shot, when we're seeing Merritt rehearsing and realize it's a slow realization as we discover that she's acting and rehearsing a part, and the tear that we see on her face is not a genuine tear, it's part of her performance. And then we go on to have conversations about theater and cinema and the relationship between how those art forms approach illusion and approach representing to different degrees of verisimilitude. And I'm talking a lot, and I'm curious if you could just speak about how this question of illusion and its relationship to disillusionment or disappointment or an act of deception shaped the story that you wanted to tell around these characters and their sort of naughty relationships.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit complicated because in German it's another title, or it's kind of, in German the title is und dass man ohne Täuschung zu leben vermag. It means something like, kind of the same, but Täuschung more in this deception way and not in this disillusional way. At the same time, it's a quote from Ingeborg Bachmann, from a speech of her, and this quote follows me for a very long time now, and a part of this quote is, maybe I can quote it again in German because it's, even if no one maybe understands, but I've tried to translate it in English. The truth, or human beings can bear the truth, or kind of live with the truth, who can better prove themselves that there is a way to get strength out of it's hard to translate, but in the end there's this parallel of Täuschung and enttäuscht, like about this deception and disillusionment or disillusion, that is really important for me, or was important for me to understand, that the fact that someone, or that I have an illusion about something, is also a self-deception. And if I am disappointed about something, it can also be a way of emancipation, to let it go. And that helped me a lot in so many different situations of life. And I think that's what interested me in this quote for a long time. And then I realized that it has a lot to do with the characters, of course, and with their lives, but also in a very universal way with the question of this kind of self-lie, or like letting go some patterns, which means you have to acknowledge your patterns to just let it go, or let them go. Also like this kind of thinking about stereotypes, thinking about how people are with each other and are with themselves, or are to each other, to themselves. It's a very, like, everything is kind of connected in this, in this in this title for me, and that's why, in the end, because he quoted it, I like the young guy reads Ingeborg Bachmann, so it was clear that I would love to take it as a title.
I think what you're describing gets at a quality of the film that I find really unique, which is that I think you're interested in taking these characters with different kinds of relationships to one another and sort of mapping out these geometries of intimacy and of cruelty and of compassion, and really very precisely sort of delineating or excavating how these characters see one another and see themselves, and how their ability to be honest with themselves or honest with one another occurs on these vectors, these sort of axes that connect them and that are always shifting. And part of what I think is so powerful about your film is that those relationships, there's an abstraction to what I'm just describing, but it's also very formally grounded in the visual logic of the film and the way in which you show bodies moving through spaces and the way in which spaces are delineated, and even down to sort of the texture of the image, the composition of the image, just the way in which we see these characters exist in space corresponds to these sort of non-physical geometries that I'm talking about. And I wonder if you could just speak about perhaps how writing the film, writing these characters and their dialogue and their interactions corresponded for you with the logic of visualizing their relationships and how you would show them to us.
Yeah, I think I can't answer this question without mentioning that due to the fact that we shot analog in 16mm, we only had this 10-minute rolls and not so much money, so we could not afford like 20 takes for each scene. So we really had to do it in 2 or 3 takes. That meant that I really had to decide beforehand what I need, what I like, and where to cut, and where to, and of which scene or moment I do need a covering of some perspectives, and in which situation I can just, cut in and out during the shoot. That's a very important fact to know why we did it like that, because I think that's also a kind of one of the reasons, but at the same time it was, and that's also a reason why I shoot in analog, not the only reason, of course there is also an aesthetical one, but because I love this kind of concentrating on, this consciousness about the decisions and the clearness for the communication also with the actors. But when I step back to the writing process, I wrote it during 6 months, and I didn't start linearly with I started with situations that I had in mind, and also with images, and then I filled up the images. Sometimes it's really different. For some scenes I had the text and then had the image, and in other scenes I had an image in my mind, and then it was kind of clear what the people like. Yeah, and in the end I I connected the parts and filled it with connecting moments also. But I think that's maybe sounds now too easy, but because of course I knew the story. Of course I had the story. For me it was clear that it's a situation between 2 women in a kind of toxic relationship where there's also violence, and I knew that I don't want to show this like pure violence in a action way or something like that, or in a very bleeding whatever way, like that was clear. So it's really hard to tell, because it wasn't such a conscious process of yeah. But in the end, I'm not sure if, because the question had many parts, I guess.
I think you've certainly answered the question I intended to ask. It sort of guides me to my next question, which has to do with the performances and the way in which the actors who you found to embody these characters convey in a very, very precise kind of stylization that's both naturalistic, but also there's an artifice that is presenting itself, it's being honest about its own status as artifice and as an enactment. And I just would love to hear about conversations you had with your actors, how you work with your actors to play with these ideas of theatricality and of the creation of an illusion of reality.
I had the luck that my actors kind of understood very well from the beginning on. And I think it's also part of this, or the way the script was written, they could understand. I didn't have to say so much, because, of course, the script is really like in detail. It was like every word was written like it is. Every break, every pause, every silent moment was written. And only a few times we changed something due to like spatial questions, or yeah. So that, and I think that kind of helped them, because the text is already a bit. It's not this. It's a mixture between daily language, but also kind of sometimes jumping into the more written language. I think it's a mix. It's not the one and not the other completely, and that meant that I think they kind of couldn't do it very differently. And then we had the composition of the image and the choreography, because sometimes we didn't have a lot of choices, because the rooms were as they were. So we had doors and we had layers, we had windows, and it was clear that we can use them, and when we want to use them. So we had the movements. And of course, that was also then a thing that I was thinking about beforehand. In which situations is it important that the bodies are really close to us? In which situation do I want to hold the tension of a not moving image for a long time? And in which situation do I want to have a pan or a movement of the camera? That was clear, and with the text, which it was also clear, and with this limit of the material, which was also clear, it was kind of clear to everyone. And but I was happy to have actors who really understood. Yeah, that I think that's a lucky thing, also. Yeah.
Again, this leads me to my next question, which has to do with the physical locations of the shoot. I feel that the visual space in this film, in a way that to me is quite legible, becomes a metaphorical mapping of, you know, the walls that might exist between individuals and the apertures within those walls, you know, that might frame what portion of another person's experience we can see, in the way that a window might frame what portion of another room we can see. And so much of that is embedded in the spaces that you've captured, and that you have your actors moving around in. Could you speak about the locations and what you were looking for in them and how you approached working in them?
Yeah. We shot in 3 different cities because we had a lot of also a lot of problems. We shot during the pandemic, like the first year or second year, and it was really hard. So we had to start in another city, and then we had a second shoot next year in another city, and then we ended in Berlin. I think that's kind of taking away the magic of the illusion of the one city, but it plays in. But I think that's also kind of important because in the end, it didn't matter so much for me which city it is, because the rooms and what I told already, that that it was important to have layers, because this layering also allows to make the space, or divide the space into parts, and also give the option of giving the characters kind of their secrets and their safe spaces also, to maybe be able to decide which part of which action I want to see. And that was kind of important, because I think, and that was kind of on purpose, of course, that we can't always see everything of a person's emotional background or mind, or only yourself can know what's going. Like, we can guess and we can see a lot, but we can't see everything if we're not communicating well. And that's also a thing. I mean, it's about communication all the time. They're not talking to each other about even the young couple is not really talking about what they need and what they want. They try to, but it's not really working, I guess. So, yeah.
And in a way, what you're describing, I think, also is an acknowledgement of the way in which the film itself creates illusion, and the idea that because the film projects an awareness of how limited the camera's perspective is, and how the narrator we might assume the narrator is omniscient, but by virtue of the frame and the spatial relationship of the camera and the actors, we are made aware of the fact that there's action that we're not seeing. There's reality to this reality that we're not witnessing. And I think, the fact that there is, at the very start of the film, a conversation about cinema and about a filmmaker and an audience's reaction to her artwork, sets us up to think in this sort of meta way about the film that we're watching and the nature of illusion and artifice. And so I guess it's a very broad question, but I'm curious, sort of, how did the philosophy of, or how does your philosophy about the film that you are making as the filmmaker correspond to the meaning of the film and the ideas that the film itself is communicating about cinema and about, teaching us how to watch the film,
Yeah.
So it's a weird question.
The thing is, I'm not sure if I can say it in English. I try. I mean, nothing is in the end, really objective in film. Even if you have a not moving camera all the time, someone shows the part you see, and it's also a very powerful position to choose the part everyone else has to see then for 10 minutes or 20 or 5 or in this case then 90 or 109. And I think that's also why maybe some of you have seen that we didn't clean the gate of the analog material, and there was this kind of hair sometimes or dirt, and normally you conceal that in grading or you conceal the flimmering, like this flesh things, and but I kind of liked it because I thought it makes this mechanical and also chemical process of making a film and telling a story, which is made up, of course. Parts of it are maybe part of me, parts of it are part of some other people I know, but it's a story, and I think it doesn't have to hide that it's a story because it still is. And that's what I like about this kind of editing rhythm. Also in other films, I like that a lot. That it leaves these gaps, this blanco spaces where I think everyone who sees it can fill these spaces with their own thoughts and assumptions, and also everyone, when I have talks about the film afterwards, I always get the feeling that everyone has seen another film, like a different film, and that's really nice, and I think that's what cinema can do. But that means also that people, of course, have to be, or we as filmmakers have to trust the people that we don't have to tell them everything, and it's not important to, like, yeah. I think that's something that sometimes is a bit lost in cinema. Not always, but for me, that I have to, or also in TV, or even more in TV, that of course, I'm over. Everything is told out until the smallest detail, and there is no room to feel what I want to feel when I see something. I don't know if that was clear, but
completely. And I think part of, and unfortunately, I think we're nearly out of time. But I find this film mysterious in the most beautiful way because it invites participation on the part of the viewer, and it opens up itself to a conversation with the viewer. And I appreciate having the opportunity to have this conversation with you. I think, it looks like we are just about out of time. But thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Katharina, so much.
Thank you for having me and having the film.